Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudd with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion. It is Sunday, the 4th day of October 2020, and we got a lot to talk about today. The tropic's going to stay busy for the next several days with the potential threat of a developing hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico coming from the system Invest 92L in the Caribbean Sea this afternoon, but I think it's going to move out of there. It is going to strengthen and become the 8th or 9th hurricane, whatever it is, of the season. I do believe that's on the way. Here's what's going on from the National Hurricane Center homepage. We have Gamma over here, and not to dismiss what's happening with Gamma, that's still very much a big rainmaker and just overall a nasty weather producer down here in the extreme southern Gulf of Mexico, just off the tip of the Yucatan. But then we have 92L with basically 80% chance of development here just to the south and east of Jamaica. We'll take a closer examination of this in a moment. Another feature out in the central Atlantic that's not going to develop, neither is this system here. During this time of year, this is the area that we focus on mainly. And the open Atlantic, yes, you can still get development out here, but it's really this area that we pay the closest attention to. So that's where we will put the check mark for today. So look at the vorticity signature here. This is from yesterday at around the same time, 15 UTC yesterday. And mainly I want you to pay attention to 92L right here. Everything else you can watch if you want, but this is the area that I really want you to focus on. And then let's go look at the vorticity for today. And you can see it hasn't moved a lot in that time frame, basically 24 hours later, but it's definitely increased in the vorticity signature and the overall organization. It's slowly getting better organized. There's no denying that. And it's sitting over very warm water. The atmosphere is going to become more and more favorable. It has busted through this little area, this PV streamer that was stuck in here. That potential vorticity, or whatever it's called, PV streamer. It's just an area that kind of pinches off in the atmosphere and it creates a lot of shear and a lot of unfavorable conditions. And when these robust tropical waves move through those and they come out on the other side, so to speak, the streamers through here, generally, then they usually have a much more favorable area ahead of them, and that's what we're going to be seeing. It does appear with Invest area 92L. So looking at the bigger picture here, in the eastern Pacific, there's Hurricane Marie, slowly winding down as it works its way into cooler water. Pretty broad turning of a system here, another piece of energy here, maybe a little bit more south of Guatemala and El Salvador. But it's in the Atlantic basin, and really none of these systems out here are going to affect anybody. Land masses anyway. Any shipping interest out there, sure, these could be problematic, but for land masses, the eastern Pacific, I think, is going to close out the hurricane season with no direct major impacts to Mexico. Any of the Mexican coastline up here basically getting away with, no major problems, which is great. That's a good thing because you can certainly get some nasty hurricanes there, just not this year. So we will focus more and more on 92L over here. Here's Gamma, Tropical Storm Gamma, just to the north of the Yucatan, starting to get sheared and ingest some of that dry air. And then you've got this frontal boundary draped across the region that stretches for thousands and thousands of miles. And this moisture coming out of the Caribbean and the Gulf is being pulled to the north and east. And that's at the mid and upper levels, and then at the surface we've got high pressure driving these northeast winds in as this front has come into the area, kind of like a backdoor cold front. And I'm telling you, because I was there, I was out watching my son's soccer game today. It's so nice to have sports back in action, a little bit of normalcy in this unbelievably crazy year. And it was like 62 degrees, about a 5 to 10 mile northeast wind, and I know that's not much. But it was raining, just that light rain where there's like drop, 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 consistently for the whole 3 hours that we were out there. We had 2 games. And it was interesting as I was explaining to my wife, some of this moisture is being pulled in from Tropical Storm Gamma. She's like, I don't care where it's coming from. It's cold and it's nasty. And it's just interesting because you can get that indirect connection where the moisture is being strewn. That's a word, right? Strewn, strung out, strewn, whatever, over thousands of miles, from the source region of the Caribbean Sea and the southern Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the far reaches of the North Atlantic. I just think it's neat. All right, so let's zoom in on some of these features. And here is Gamma. Definitely undergoing some structural differences today. The overall pattern is not as favorable for Gamma right now. Limited deep convection. There's one little lightning strike in there. Some heavier thunderstorms percolating over here on the northeast side. And some of these may lift off to the north and east with time and bring some squally weather to Florida. And the deep moisture feed coming in all the way from the Caribbean across western Cuba here. Here's the Cayman Islands down here. We're going to talk about your area in just a moment as we talk about 92L. But notice over on the western side over here, these low clouds, especially down here, that's very indicative. I mean, that's the telltale sign of dry air in the atmosphere, and Gamma is running into that. Now, one thing that Gamma is going to do, overall, it's going to moisten up the environment. It's bringing this huge area of heat and energy, and even though the background state over here is negative, and that's going to cause Gamma to weaken, among other things, it is a source of moisture and heat. There's no doubt about it. And think about it. Condensation, the release of energy in these rain bands and what little core there's left of Gamma, any of those big rain bands, etc., condensation is a warming process. So it's warming the atmosphere around it, it's shedding that energy out, and it'll leave behind a more favorable atmosphere as it kind of starts to die away. And I think that's going to help to prime things for Delta, eventually what will be Delta, I believe, from 92L, in the days ahead. So this kind of leaves a legacy behind, if you will, that'll make things more favorable for the eventual development of 92L. But for now, rain showers from time to time, just the general moisture feed over the northern Yucatan here, and then the hurricane itself up here over the southern Gulf of Mexico. And it is a hurricane, or is it a tropical storm? That's sad that it's a tropical storm, sorry. 60 miles per hour. My fault. Tropical storm Gamma. Maybe I know what's coming with 92L. That's going to be a hurricane, I do believe. Anyway, Tropical Storm Gamma going to bring continuation of this inclement weather down here across the Yucatan. So if you're vacationing there, sorry, going to be a nasty couple of days. You just picked a bad time. Normally, it's September, August, September that you got to really worry about things. But even October, hurricane season's not over. And then we got to really watch this. This is Invest Area 92L in the Caribbean. And there's a few things that I'm noticing. I think we can all see the vorticity right in here, the spin, the low-level spin. It is well on its way to becoming a tropical depression. It's developing some thunderstorms near the low-level center, which is right in here. It's got a lot of lightning and instability over on the east side, and a pretty large overall envelope of influence through here. This outflow trying to develop, it's trying. So you guys in Jamaica, from here on out, you're going to get this off and on showery, maybe some thunderstorms, depending on if any of these bands blow up right over Jamaica. But then this whole mess looks like it's going to move into the direction of the Cayman Islands over here. And I know we've got a lot of people that view these videos from the Caymans, and it's been a while since you've had a direct impact from a significant system. You've had other systems bother you this year with some other impacts, but as this develops, it's still a couple of days away. It could be strengthening as it passes the vicinity of the Caymans. And just a reminder, a strengthening system, I don't care if it's a depression going to tropical storm phase or tropical storm going to hurricane phase, once they are starting to go on the up, right, when they are on the up, so to speak, when the convection is going up, and that's what I'm trying to say here, when they are in the formative stages the effects tend to be much more pronounced. So you're going to have to watch that very closely. Maybe down in the Caymans, kicking back in the Bathwater Caribbean Sea, which is very warm down there. I've never been to the Caymans, but I bet it's fantastic. And you might be thinking, it's an invest area. Not going to worry about it. Might be a depression when it gets here. But I'm just reminding you, as these things start to explode over that warm water, that deep convection can bring down very heavy rainfall, gusty winds, and again, just like I said the other day, related to tourists and other interests along Belize and up towards Cancun and Cozumel and that vicinity. Small craft, boats, out on kayaking, whatever you do down in the Caymans. You got those little cabanas, umbrellas. That stuff can get blown away. So just don't dismiss this, that it's not going to be a big deal just because it's not already a hurricane. I believe this will start strengthening over the day tomorrow, and as it passes the vicinity of the Caymans here, it could be fairly formidable with some pretty sensible impacts, meaning impacts that you can feel. And then the western tip of Cuba up here, the Isle of Youth, etc. You're probably going to have to deal with this in the coming days as well. All right, so what's going to happen later on? Well, assuming that this does come across somewhere in this vicinity, we'll try to draw a pretty big arrow there. Let's say it does something like that, the general track. Lots of warm water at the surface over the next couple of days. No doubt about it. And we're going to look at the upper ocean heat content in just a moment. But what happens when it gets, just for the sake of argument, and yes, the modeling is showing this, let's say that the system gets up somewhere in this region. Well, that's the 26 Celsius isotherm right there. Isotherm means line of equal temperature. So that's about just shy of 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside of that line, closer to the coast, it's colder. The water temperatures are colder, upper 70s. And yes, we've had some colder, drier air sitting over this area, and that has cooled down the sea surface temperatures for sure. And so it's not as likely that you could get a hurricane. Let's just pretend that this is strong and it comes up here and it makes landfall somewhere in Mississippi. Let's just be hypothetical. You might look at that and go, dude, it's going to come out of that 26 Celsius, and that purple down there, that's like, what, 25, maybe 24 Celsius, mid-70s. It's done. It'll weaken rapidly. I'll show you why that might not be the case. And it's not some wishful thinking hype that I'm coming up with. I mean, sure, it probably will, because the water is colder. But I just want you to go back and look at Sally. Sally was coming in. It was disheveled. It looked like the day that led up to landfall, it looked like that Sally was not going to amount to much overall. And it came in, and the water temperatures were warmer back then, but it came in and it made landfall here across Gulf Shores, Alabama. And I'll tell you, as we zoom in here, and again, this is old, I'm sorry, this is not old, this is the current. I don't have the old sea surface temperatures in front of me at the moment from when that happened, but it doesn't matter because my point is the same. Gulf Shores, Alabama, right here, Sally came in, made landfall, and put a heck of a surge and other problems all across this area, and it strengthened from whatever hurricane to whoa, Category 2 in just a fairly short amount of time, moving very slowly. Remember? Of course you do. Everybody thought, and pretty much everybody, the general consensus, the loud voices on social media were, whatever, that, it's moving slowly, it's going to get into that shallow shelf water, and it'll just, that's it. There's no way it's going to strengthen. And look what happened. It's hard to explain why that happened. I don't really know. I guess the upper dynamics, the overall pattern, aside from sea surface temperatures, was very favorable in that last 6 to 8 hours. And Sally ramped up to Category 2, almost Category 3. And anybody that lives down here, you have the scars, literally, to remember this by. And it's true. And so even though that shallow shelf water should have meant, Sally probably won't do much, it had its chance, look what happened. That's all I'm saying. we have to watch this, and I would suspect, although we don't know for sure because it's still several days away, that delta to be, and I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but presuming that it becomes delta, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of me and shrink that screen back. Delta should be moving faster. What would be delta should be moving faster than Sally, and I do believe as that system comes up somewhere through this region and here, it will be stronger already than Sally was. Sally ramped up at the last few hours there. You understand? So there's some very big differences in the two situations. So that is something to keep in mind. It really is. And as we get to the sea surface temperatures from there to the upper ocean heat content, just wow. This is the highest ocean heat content values in the Western Hemisphere, bar none. And so again, you guys in the Caymans, yep, Western Cuba, could be looking at a strengthening system as it comes by your area. Then, as we look at the bigger picture, especially over here in the Gulf, yes, we do have a trailing off of those upper ocean heat content values near the northern Gulf Coast, but that is not everything. We've had, marginal upper ocean heat content over here in the vicinity of Bermuda in times past, and I think it was Ophelia a few years ago. Hurricane Ophelia, let's see, that was in 05, 6 years later would be 11, plus 6 would be 17. We had an Ophelia in 17, is that right? Maybe it was 11. I don't know. But there was a hurricane that was out this way, somewhere in the vicinity of Bermuda, and it was in marginal sea surface temperatures, and it became a Category 3, because everything else was, perfect. And, there's a line, I'm trying to not cross it, between I hate that word hype, but we would all think, not much heat content, sea surface temperatures are lowered, nothing to worry about. And hopefully that's the case. But I'm just wanting to be careful that we don't paint a sense of false security. Mainly because everything that's made landfall this year has done so strengthening, and that's a fact. And what Sally did was very remarkable, considering the shelf water in the vicinity of Gulf shores. It's not too shallow, but still, that thing was moving 2 or 3 miles per hour. It should have self-destructed, upwelled colder water, and whatever. So, not trying to be that guy that's like, yeah, it's coming in, I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm just saying upper ocean heat content and sea surface temperatures are not the only factors. If they were, we would have 100 hurricanes every year in the Atlantic. Because starting in late May, most of the Atlantic basin is warm enough. So if it was just sea surface temperatures, there would be hurricanes every other day. And there's not. All right. So I'm not going to go over the global models. Why? Well, they've been terrible. They honestly have been terrible. It's time to really look at the hurricane models. The HWRF, which is based off the GFS background data, and the HMON, which replaced the GFDL. These are hurricane-specific models, tropical models, developed just for tropical cyclone tracking. So let's take a look at the 12Z. This is from 12Z today. HWRF, own invest 92L, and see what happens. You probably already know this, but we're going to look at it, and it'll kind of prove my point here. It gets organized. There it goes past Jamaica towards the Caymans. And as it gets to the vicinity of the Caymans, fairly small system, but it is strengthening at that time. And it's just going to matter, where does it go? Does it go right over one of the islands? Does it go between them? There's no way to know for sure. This is 42 hours out, and we just don't know for sure. But it definitely ramps up, passes the Caymans, goes over the western tip of Cuba, strengthening into the upper 960 millibar range, and then goes down further into the low 960s, and then it starts to come back up with the pressure overall, feeling that cooler shelf or cooler Gulf water probably, but still lower 970s with a landfall in southeast Louisiana, and then finally, basically over just to east of New Orleans and into Mississippi. That's nothing to just dismiss. and it's going to really matter how strong it is beforehand, what the core structure is like, and so forth and so on. The HMON is pretty much the same kind of deal here. We can look at this over the next few days, and again, it ramps it up, comes past the Caymans, a little bit farther to the west, definitely, than the H-Wharf, and you can see there's the Yucatan going by, and then it comes up, also strengthens into the 950 millibar range, 950s, and even 948 there. Wow! Probably a Category 4 in this model run. And what does it do? Same kind of deal, but more to the east there at the end, and it's coming in at about 956 millibars towards the Mississippi Sound, which is right through here, just off the islands. And, you know, yes, the water temperatures are colder, but, all right, and I've been waiting to spring this on you. This is why I am skeptical that cooler sea surface temperatures automatically mean in this situation with 92L future delta that we get a free pass, that we can avoid a major hurricane landfall. I'm not saying there's going to be one. I'm just saying, well, let's just look at what somebody who knows a lot more about hurricanes than I do did when they did some research. And so this guy, Dr. Joseph Cione, down at NOAA's AOML, right, the Atlantic Oceanographic Meteorological Lab, I think, Hurricane Research Division. Yeah, it is right there. Atlantic Oceanographic Meteorological Laboratory. I have been there. I have done seminars there myself. I've been a speaker. And this guy, Dr. Cione, you know, one of the world's best. That's why he works at NOAA's AOML. What does Joe say? Well, how do hurricanes form, survive, and intensify? Long believed that upper ocean temperatures are the key factor. AOML's Dr. Joe Cione reveals a new theory after observing 62 Atlantic hurricanes over a span of 32 years, suggesting that this common theory may not be all that accurate. If it holds, it could have the potential to significantly improve hurricane intensity forecasts for the nation. Now, when did this come out? This came out, I believe, in 2015. We are now 5 years after this study, and the H-Wharf has really come along since then. And I'm telling you, that model knows about sea surface temperatures. They're coupled, and as is the HMON, if I am not mistaken. So this came out, I think, like I said, this paper was published in 15. 5 years later, the models have gotten even better, especially the hurricane models. All right, so that's very important to keep in mind. So let's just read further. The study assessed sea surface temperature conditions, monitoring the difference between the dew point temperature and the sea surface temperature within the hurricane environment. When the dew point was higher than the hurricane's inner core sea surface temperature area, then the storm's internal energy would decrease and it would weaken. Contrary, though, to long-held assumptions, results from this study show that hurricanes can and occasionally do maintain intensity even when sea surface temperatures are at or below the threshold of 26 Celsius. In 6% of the cases, that's not a lot, but that's still enough, Dr. Cione studied those 6% that the ocean temperatures of 26 Celsius or higher were not required for the hurricane to survive. So, 6%, right? If you had 100 balls, ping pong balls, and 6 of them said yes, and 94 said no, you know, odds are the no's are going to win out. But that's still 6%, and that's not really an accurate analogy here because he was studying, 62 hurricanes. But anyway, 6% out of that study, the 26 degrees Celsius didn't matter. There's other factors, and I'm going to put a link to this in the description of today's video so that you can read it yourself and make of it what you will. And big thanks to Brent. I'm not going to take credit that I found it. Brent, one of our Patreon supporters and crew members that helps us out in the field, he was doing some research on all of this in his spare time down in the Virgin Islands where there is no lack of ocean heat content, it seems. It's always hot down there, he tells me, very muggy. He stumbled across this article in his research, so very good, or as Michael Scott would do. But, you know, that was always in sarcasm. In this case, it's very sincere. I've been watching The Office lately. I just got into it, so forgive me. So there you go. We don't know what's going to happen. I don't know for sure, but the modeling is coming around. The hurricane models are definitely compelling. The environment looks like it's going to be favorable. Bottom line, we are not out of hurricane season yet. And I just want to add one more little piece here. We don't know how sharp that turn to the right will be, if it even happens at all. If it's more sharp, and that thing is stronger earlier, there's the potential, at least on the very, I don't know. I mean, there's at least some potential, especially if you look at the ensembles, that this turns sharp enough to head over towards the Florida Peninsula, and then we have an even bigger problem over that way. We will address that if we need to, but the bottom line, from Key West all the way around to Galveston, Texas, just keep your eyes on this. That doesn't mean panic or worry about it or anything like that. Don't get upset about it. Don't get mad at me for telling you that. It's just, you know, hopefully it's common sense. It's, you know, is it November 30th yet? No, it's not. It's still very much hurricane season. So, yes, if you're from Key West or you're from Galveston and any point in between, I do want you to keep an eye on what's happening with 92L. We're not done. It's that simple. All right? All right, well, I'm done. I'm going to wrap things up. As always, we are funded by our Patreon group, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. If you want to become part of that crowd, it's 750 plus strong. It changes from, you know, on a day-to-day basis. You get that many people. Some people come, some people go. But boy, it has really grown this year, and I appreciate that a lot. It has allowed us to do some incredible things, and we'll talk about that more in the week ahead, of course. You guys have a great rest of your Sunday, and as always, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate that. Don't forget to like the video so it kind of gets boosted, I guess, as they say, with its popularity. We want as many people to see these videos as possible to grow what we're doing here. We're all in it together. Again, have a great rest of your Sunday. Thanks for tuning in and listening to me. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.